Welcome. Thank you for watching this teaching video from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. Please check out our other videos and don't forget to like and subscribe. Our mission is to help people come to know Jesus better and love Him more every day. We believe this will not only help our own spiritual growth, but also help us better influence the community and the world for Christ. For more information about Oak Tree, please visit us at oaktreechurch.com. There you'll find past message series, online giving options, and more information about our discipleship process that we call The Path. Now enjoy this message. We'd love to hear from you in the comments or the website contact form. Thank you.
We are coming to chapters 12 and 13 over the next couple of weeks. And chapter 12, I don't know if I just say slide or something, but chapter 12 is one of the probably the most famous chapters, actually, in the book of the Revelation. We've seen some weird ones. We've seen some ones you're like, okay, it's been a while since I've been through Revelation. I don't even remember that part, right? It's like, where in the world did that happen? But some of these are really well known. Some of these are the things that most people think of when they think of the book of the Revelation, and especially the concept of the dragon. Right, the dragon. If anybody knows anything about the Revelation, the dragon seems to be one of the main characters, one of the main antagonists in the whole thing. We finally get to the dragon. we're halfway through the book. We're like, there's been no dragons anywhere. What is this? Just we finally get to the dragon in these next couple of chapters. And so chapter 12 is one of the more famous chapters from that standpoint. And according to Dr. Tom Constable, it's probably one of the best, not even one of, I would say Tom Constable's commentary is the best readily available commentary on the Bible. And the reason for that is because it's free. It's hard to argue with free, okay? Really hard to argue. Now, sometimes free doesn't mean good. You get what you pay for in a lot of instances. I'll give you that. But Dr. Constable is a fantastic scholar. He's been a teacher at a couple of different schools for decades, probably 40, 50 years. And he has written a commentary on the entire Bible. And it is thousands and thousands and thousands of pages long, and it is available for free on the internet. You can, in the HTML format, just right there on your website, on your browser, you can read it. You can download a PDF file for each book of the Bible, 66 PDFs. They're searchable. They're anything you want. It's a fantastic commentary. And if you go to netbible.org, the notes are right there along with the text. You've got all of the study notes for the Net Bible, which is what I use here, and Constable's notes are there as well. Or his church, Plano, Texas, planobiblechapel.org has all of those that you can download if you want as well. And we can throw those links up on the website and in the stream if you want, planobiblechapel.org or netbible.org. Anyway, the reason for that little side is because I have a quote from Dr. Constable here. God gave John, as we come to chapter 12, God gave John knowledge of the forces and the persons behind the climax of anti-God hostility, so that he could understand these judgments that are going to come in just a few chapters. We call them the bowl judgments, or some older commentators call them the vial. Think of like a scientific, like a laboratory vial, and where you just pour it out. You're very particular, very specific about what you put into it and what comes out of it. So some people look at them as vials because they're very precise, exactly what God wants to happen. Those are going to come up in chapters 15 and 16. And those are going to be at the end of our 70th week. And what John is seeing here in chapters 12 and 13, we'll come over to the board a little bit later, but what John is seeing is going to happen in the midpoint. And Dr. Constable says what he sees at the midpoint is setting him up so he truly understands why God's judgments are going to be so harsh If you think the stuff that God has done already with the trumpets is bad, if you think what's already gone on with what John has seen in the seals and the wars and the famine and the plagues and all of those things, if you think that's bad, God says, wait until you see the final judgments, the labor pains, the end of the contractions. Wait until you see just the final push. And according to Dr. Constable here, he says that it's possible that God was setting John up in a sense because those things are going to be so terrible. And let's remember, I mean, I'm thinking ahead. I know what, and if you've read it recently, you remember what chapters 15 and 16 are talking about. If you don't, you will in a few weeks here. Okay? And it is horrible. It is terrible. It's almost unimaginable. And that's just us reading it. Let's not forget, John had to see it. John wasn't just reading this stuff. John was watching this stuff happen. And so for him to see all of this destruction, to see all of this judgment happening, he's still a sinful, finite human being. And even though he's in a vision, even though he's not in the middle of what's actually happening, experiencing it, just to see and to watch his world be judged like is going to happen. Tom Constable says, it could be that what God shows John here in chapters 12 and 13 are helping prepare him, prepare his mind, prepare his heart because of how bad it's going to be. Now, that's his speculation, that's his opinion, may or may not be the case. Even if it's not the intention, it's pretty good. Okay, because what we see in these chapters, like I've said earlier, is we are seeing finally, for the first time in human history, Satan's kingdom being established, set up on earth in a way that he's always wanted it to happen and has never been allowed to do it because he's been on a short leash. Now, you look at the world around us and say, he's on a short leash? It looks to me like he's on a really, really, really long leash. And God says, no, I've got Satan pretty well on a short leash right now. You don't want to see what happens when I say sick him. Because that's what's going to happen at the midpoint of the 70th week. And that's what's happening in these couple of chapters. Now, this is also one of the places where those people who like to attack the Bible, and especially attack our method of interpretation, a literal, grammatical, historical interpretation, especially that literal part. We like to forget the grammatical, historical, and everybody focuses on the literal part. They come to this chapter and they're like, there's no way you can take this literally. There's absolutely no way. You're going to be seeing this woman clothed with the sun. That's not literal. You're going to be seeing this dragon and there's a flood coming out of its mouth. Come on, there's no way. And we sort of sheepishly have to say, you're right, that's not literally going to happen. And they say, aha! Aha! We have finally broken you of your literalness. It's about time you, and this is not an exaggeration, I've had conversations like this. It's about time you admit that you are not really interpreting the Bible literally. You say everybody else is not interpreting it literally, and you won't do it yourself. You change when necessary. And here's my response. Well, let's just take a look at verse 1. And I point them to verse 1 and verse 3. And just the first couple of words in verses 1 and 3 say this. Then a great sign appeared in heaven. Verse 3. Then another sign appeared in heaven. John is telling us what I saw is intentionally a symbol for something else. We don't have to guess. We're not changing our interpretation method to suit our doctrine, to suit our needs. We're not saying, well, in this place it's literal, in this place it's not. Here he specifically says, all right, I'm showing you a sign. There was a sign that I saw. It is standing in place for something else. And then he's going to tell us what it is. So we don't even have to guess at the interpretation of it. He's going to tell us this is a symbol and here's its meaning. So are we interpreting literally? Yes, absolutely we are. We're taking the text, what it tells us. We are literally saying it's a sign. And we are literally saying he's telling us what the sign means. We are indeed following our method of interpretation. Okay? So don't let somebody, and like I said, I have these conversations all the time with people who try to push back and say, see, you're not honest in your interpretation. You are not handling the text honestly. I say, when John tells me it's a symbol, I'm going to literally take it that it's a symbol. And then he's going to explain it for us. So, there are two signs that appeared in heaven, a woman and a dragon. Now, here's what we have to understand. And if we can move on to the next slide, we're going to see these two signs. In chapter 12, we're going to see these signs are past tense. They're setting up what John is seeing in his vision, which this is going to be weird. Present tense for him, but still future for us. So the signs are past tense. The signs are setting up what is coming in the future. And they're sort of happening simultaneously. This is not meant to be like, okay, then there was the woman, and then there was the dragon, and then there was the this, and then there was the that. It's not intended to be chronological all the way through. He's telling us about the signs, and then he's using the visual of those signs to tell us what he's seeing in his vision. Okay? So we'll walk through that, and it'll make sense when I say it. So I've got on the slide, I've got the red and the purple they're two signs that are happening somewhat simultaneously, and it's hard to do that with just bullet points. But let me read through chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, and then that'll set up where we're at. So there was a great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, and with the moon under her feet, and on her head was a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was screaming in labor pains, struggling to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, a huge red dragon that had 7 heads and 10 horns, and on its heads were 7 diadem crowns. Let me read verse 4 as well. Now the dragon's tail swept away a third of the stars in heaven and hurled them to the earth. And then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. It's just weird. I'll give you that, right? It's just weird. I mean, this is what fantasy stories are made of and that sort of thing, except we have to remember that it's a sign for something else, and he will interpret this sign for us. But here are the two signs. First of all, there's this woman clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, just 12 stars and a crown on her head. If we were to go back to Genesis chapter 37, this is real similar to Joseph's dream with the sun and the moon and the 12 stars. And that one was already interpreted for us. In Joseph's dream, the 12 stars were the tribes of Israel, right? The 12 stars were Israel. The sun in Joseph's dream, the sun was Jacob, and the moon was Joseph's mother. Let's say Joseph. That's what Jacob said. Your mother, Joseph's mother, Rachel, had died by that point, but Leah was still alive and everything. But it was the family of Israel. It was the family of Israel was in Joseph's dream. So let's just park that there for just a second. In the second sign, we have this dragon. And this dragon has horns, and this dragon has heads, and this dragon has crowns. And what we really have to do is go back to the book of Daniel. So, like we have so many times before, let's go back to Daniel, and we'll be in chapter 7 this time. Daniel chapter 7. And this is what sets up. This is not the first time that John has heard these things about horns and crowns and stuff. This comes directly out of what Daniel is talking about, what Daniel is seeing in his dream and visions, according to Daniel chapter 7, verse 1, he wrote down his dream in order, in a summary fashion. And what he saw was 4 animals or 4 beasts that represent the kingdoms of his time: Babylon, Persia, and Greece. And then he saw a 4th beast. And this is where we pick up in verses 7 and 8. After these things, I was watching in the night visions. A 4th beast appeared. One dreadful, terrible, very strong. It had 2 large rows of iron teeth. It devoured and crushed, and anything that was left, it trampled with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that came before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, isn't that interesting? Because we see 10 horns in Revelation 12. Verse 8, as I was contemplating the horns, another horn, a small one, came up between them, and 3 of the former horns were torn out by the roots to make room for it. Think, wisdom teeth, right? Think as our teeth are coming in, we have to make room, and sometimes wisdom teeth, all that. So just think of that. You've got these 10 horns on this beast, and another one comes up, and 3 of them have to be pulled or come out. This horn, this little one, this new one, had eyes resembling human eyes and a mouth speaking arrogant things. We'll be back here next time because we'll see the same thing in chapter 13. Now we have to jump down a couple of verses simply because I want to get to the interpretation of what Daniel saw. Verse 19, and I know it says 20, but verse 19, I wanted to know the meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others. It was very dreadful, with 2 rows of iron teeth and bronze claws, and it devoured and crushed and trampled anything that was left with its feet. I also wanted to know the meaning of the 10 horns on its head, and of that other horn that came up, and which was before the 3 others, which 3 others fell. And this was the horn that had eyes and a mouth speaking arrogant things, whose appearance was more formidable. Now, this is a new information. This little horn, the appearance was more formidable than the others. Here's the interpretation down in verse 24. This is what Daniel was told. The 10 horns mean that 10 kings will arise from that kingdom. So there's going to be a new empire similar to Babylon, Persia, and Greece, but even more terrible. Nothing is able to stop it. And we saw some of that in Rome in the past. But in the future, it's going to be even worse. Okay? And so 10 kings are going to arise out of that kingdom. They're going to be 10 world rulers or rulers on the world stage. And then another king will arise after them. But he's going to be different from the earlier ones. He will humiliate 3 kings. He will speak words against the Most High. He will harass the holy ones of the Most High continually. His intention will be to change times, and some people think that these are like feast days or whatever, established by the law, and the holy ones will be delivered into his hand for time, times, and half a time, which we've already seen is the 42 months, the 1,260 days, the 3.5 years of the second half of our 70th week. And so when we look in Daniel chapter 7, we find that these 10 horns are 10 rulers, and then there's another little guy who comes up who becomes somebody much bigger than he started out. And so when we get to Revelation chapter 12, John sees this dragon that has the same characteristics as this terrible, terrible world empire that Daniel foresaw. John says it's coming, and it is like nothing you've ever seen. So what happened is, now we don't know this yet, but if you want to jump down to in Revelation chapter 12, if you want to jump down to verse 9, we're going to get an interpretation because I'm already, I say that Satan took a third of the angels in his fall. So let's leave that there. But in our text, we'll jump down to verse 9 because I want to prove that that's how I'm interpreting this. Verse 9. So that huge dragon, and look how he's described, the ancient serpent. John goes not just back to Daniel, he goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. He's pulling the whole Bible in. The one called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. So John is interpreting for us this dragon that he's seeing. This dragon is Satan. And it's going, so these horns, these kings, these rulers are going to be empowered by Satan, are going to be led by Satan. This is Satan's kingdom coming to earth. And so when we see back in verse 4, now the dragon's tail had swept away a third of the stars in heaven and hurled them to earth. Sometimes we see stars and angels being sort of compared. And we've seen that in the Revelation already. I interpret that, a lot of conservative teachers interpret this to be still past tense. When Satan fell, he took a third of the angels with him. Okay? Now, you don't have to believe that if you don't want to, but that's a pretty traditional interpretation. We don't know that anywhere else in Scripture, but right here. And since this is talking about a past tense thing, it seems to be in the past tense, I think that's true. And we also know that he has always tried to destroy the woman's son. Now here's the question. Who is the woman and who is the woman's son? There is a major religion in this world, you might have heard of it before, Roman Catholicism, that interprets the woman as Mary. Mary, the mother of God, the queen of heaven, the mother of the Roman Catholic Church, right? And so the son is either Jesus or the church, depending on who you're talking to, either Jesus or the true church. So we have Mary and we have the son. Well, Jesus or the church, right? I don't think so. I don't think it's Mary. Okay? I don't think it's Mary because that doesn't seem to fit anything else in Scripture. And John is working so heavily from the Old Testament. He's drawing so heavily from the Old Testament. The Revelation cannot be interpreted properly without the Old Testament. Everything else in this context seems to be Old Testament. Why would Mary be in there? Especially when we have a dream or we have a vision in Genesis chapter 37 that already has sun, moon, and stars and is already interpreted for us. And I'm going to give another, what I think is even stronger argument why it's not Mary in a few verses here, but just run with me here for just a second. I think that this woman represents the nation of Israel. I think the woman is Israel. Okay? It doesn't say that, it says that she's clothed with the sun, that the moon is under her feet. I'm not sure exactly how to interpret those. A lot of people have given interpretations. Some of them are good, some of them are but I suppose anything is better than mine, which is like, I'm really not sure and I'm not going to take a stance. Okay? But the 12 stars definitely seem to be the tribes of Israel. I think the woman is Israel, not Mary. Okay? And I think I can prove that pretty well here in just a couple of verses here in chapter 12. What we are going to find, and we saw this in verse 4, let me take a look at verse 5 rather. So the woman gave birth to a son, a male child, who is going to rule over all the nations with an iron rod. That's the Messiah. That's not even a question. Okay? So in this vision, in this symbol, this sign, she gives birth to a son, she gives birth to a child, and he is identified as the one who's going to rule. That's the Messiah. Then her son was suddenly caught up to God and to his throne. What was that? That was the ascension. Definitely, Jesus was here, he was born, he's going to rule, he hasn't yet, and then he ascended. No problem so far. And then she, verse 6, fled into the wilderness where a place had been prepared for her by God so that she could be taken care of for 1,260 days. Isn't that interesting? Where in history did Mary run into the wilderness so that she could be supernaturally protected by God for 3.5 years. Anybody have that history lesson? We've got Egypt, but it was not, as far as we know, 3.5 years. Right? It was specifically, this is specifically told 1,260 days, not 3.5 years. But it's possible. The problem, though, is that this seems to be after he was ascended. After he was caught up to the throne of God, then the woman fled into the wilderness and was protected. So two things. It doesn't tell us 3.5 years. Maybe they were there for 3.5 years. I don't think so, but maybe they were. But definitely, this seems to be after his ascension. So, when did Mary run into the wilderness for 3.5 years to be supernaturally protected after Jesus ascended? Not as far as we know. I mean, we don't have her whole life story or anything, but as far as we know, that never happened, right? That's just part of my argument why I don't think it's Mary. We'll get to the rest of it. So, we have now, we know the Son is the Messiah. That's not a question. And it seems like Messiah in the past and the woman, who I think is the nation of Israel, in the future, are supernaturally protected because the dragon is trying to destroy. Just think about this. How has the dragon, how has Satan tried to destroy Messiah throughout history? Give me a couple of examples. I mean, I know you can come up with one of them pretty easily, but give me a couple of examples if you can think of them. He had who killed? Well, yeah, I mean, on the cross, right? There was the cross. He seemed like he won that one, right? He didn't. What? Children in Bethlehem, even before Jesus started his ministry. Herod killed the children in and around Bethlehem. Yep. They've been attacked and oppressed for centuries, right? If he can wipe out Israel, then the Messiah cannot come. And that's been true recently. I mean, Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh ordered all of the baby boys of Israel to be killed in Egypt, right? At the beginning of Exodus. And still God provided a Messiah, a deliverer for them. It wasn't the Messiah, but it was a Messiah, right? Moses. We could go even further back. We could go back, sin, all the way back to the garden. Sin, okay. When he tempted Eve and she tempted Adam, and he sinned, and God said, "This is what's going to happen. There is going to be a deliverer coming." Satan, at that point, has tried to wipe out humanity as a whole. And then when Israel came, the very first murder happened just one chapter after sin. Now, I think it was about 125 years or so after chapter 3. I think we've got a long break between chapters 3 and 4 there. But it's interesting, if we were to look in Genesis chapter 4, the very first son that was born is Cain. And if you read in the Hebrew text, what Eve says is, "I have received a man," or "I have," some translations say received, some translations say, I have made or received a man. And some translations add the word "from," but it's not in the Hebrew text. What she said was, "I have made a man or received a man, the Lord." The last thing she heard was, "I'm going to be sending a seed of the woman to do all of this stuff to redeem humanity." And the very first son that was born, she's like, "Here he is." Yeah, imagine that. That's exactly, we don't think about that, right? She honestly believed this was God, the Lord, the Redeemer, the one who was going to fix everything. I wonder he turned out such like a... And he ended up being the first murderer in his jealousy, in his envy, in his wickedness, in his depravity, and in everything where he thought he was better than anybody else. He thought he could get away with anything, and when it was time to bring a sacrifice, he brought whatever he wanted. It didn't matter that it was the best. It didn't matter. And God didn't accept it one day. And ultimately, he killed his brother. He slaughtered his brother because his brother's sacrifice was accepted and his was not. And when God called Cain on that issue, when he said, sin is knocking at your door, sin is right there at your heart's door, and from now you are going to be banished from the ground. You're not going to be able to make a living out of the ground. You're not going to be the whole thing. He's like, but this is too hard for me to bear. You can't do this to me. Somebody's going to kill me. You just killed your brother. Right? From the very beginning, Satan has tried to infect and influence so that the Redeemer can't actually come, so that the Messiah can't actually do his job. He's always tried to destroy the woman's son, even before he knew who he was. And then Jesus came, and Jesus was supernaturally protected throughout his life. He was supernaturally protected in his ascension. And so now the devil, Satan, is just trying to destroy Israel. But there has not yet been a time where Israel has to be supernaturally protected in the wilderness as a nation for 3.5 years. It seems like that still has to be future. Okay? That sets up now, that's all the past stuff. The verses 1 through 6 are the stuff that sets up what John is going to see in his vision, which I believe is all still future. So if we can move on to the next slide here and pick up in verse 7. Then war broke out in heaven. I don't think we've seen this yet. I think this is at the midpoint of our 70th week. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But the dragon, which we know is Satan because we already skipped ahead, was not strong enough to prevail, so there was no longer any place left in heaven for him and his angels. So that huge dragon, the ancient serpent, the one called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world, was thrown down to the earth, and his angels along with him. Now, there are some who would say, how is that not past tense? How is that not past? I thought Satan was already kicked out of heaven like millennia ago, thousands of years. Wasn't Satan kicked out of heaven? The answer is no. Maybe you're under the impression, maybe you've heard that Satan is kicked out of heaven. Satan no longer has access to heaven. He can't be in heaven. There are people, well, God can't have sin in heaven. Sin has already been in heaven. And it seems to me, based on a couple of passages, including here in chapter 12, that Satan still has access to heaven. One of those I can point you to is the book of Job, chapters 1 and 2. There was a time that the sons of God came into heaven, into the throne room to report, and Satan was there with them. So at least back in Job's time, he still had access. What's changed since then? Okay. As far as we know, biblically, nothing has changed since then. We're going to find out here in just a couple of verses that it seems like he is still in heaven as a prosecutor. Okay, so it makes sense that we get down to the end of the book of the Revelation and God is going to recreate heaven and earth. It's so tainted, it can't be regenerated, it can't be redeemed. People can be redeemed, but he's just going to say, he's going to look at all of creation and say, yeah, we're just starting over. So new heaven, new earth, and then it will be completely sin-free. But right now it's not. Right now, Satan, it seems, in addition to prowling around the earth like a lion, seeking whom he may devour, it seems like he has access to heaven. And he goes into heaven to report because he's still subject to God. And so it's not until this point, at the midpoint, that Satan is going to be kicked out of heaven. So come over the board. I'm going to just start making some notes as far as what's going on. There's a whole list of stuff that's going to happen at this midpoint over these next couple of chapters that we probably won't even be able to put them all on the screen. But we're just going to say Satan kicked out of heaven. And you don't have to be able to read it, and don't even try. Satan is going to be kicked out of heaven. He is now, at this point, going to be confined to earth. You think this world is bad now? Wait until Satan doesn't have an escape. Wait until his entire attention is focused on this planet. Okay, so Satan is actually removed from heaven. His work is limited here. He's kicked out of heaven. Let's keep going. We're going to be adding to this stuff. No longer any place for heaven, so he's thrown down to the earth, and his angels along with him. And let's see, I've got some other stuff on the slide here that I think is worth covering just very quickly. This description of who Satan is. So let me come back to dragon. Ancient serpent, we already saw that, the connection to Genesis 3. The word devil, the Greek word is diabolos. Right? Diabolos. Other languages, it's what? Diablo. It's a very common one that we hear, diabolos, diablo. And most of the time it's translated devil, but that's not what it means. What it means is liar. By nature, the devil is not necessarily a name. It's really more of a title. It's really more of a description. It's not who he is, it's what he is. He is, in fact, Jesus called him the father of lies. That's what he does. It's just his nature. It's his character. He can't stop lying. He is a liar by nature. And so that's a title that we give him. He is, when we talk about the devil, he's the liar. He's the liar. That's what he is. He's the accuser. He's the slanderer. The word Satan has come to be his name. That's what most people think of as his name. It is also not a name. It's also a word that's just sort of become, it's actually a title. In Hebrew, the word is, ready? Satan. Right? When we bring it over into Greek, it's Satanas, because Greek has to put an S at the end to make it masculine. Satanas. It's the same thing. All we've done is we've just brought it into English letters and capitalized the S. That's all we've done. It doesn't actually tell us anything about him, and that's why we think it's his name. But the word itself means enemy. Satan in both Hebrew and Greek means enemy or adversary. So we don't actually, you might be interested, we don't actually know his name, unless one of these is his name and it's just based on the title. We don't actually know his name. All we know is that there is this angel who his character is the lying one. He's the liar. He's the enemy of everything that God is, everything that God's people are, everything that is holy and good and just and right. He's the enemy of that. It's his character. It's his nature. That's why we don't mess around with it. We don't mess around with things that are satanic, things that are demonic. We don't mess around with that stuff because he is by nature the enemy. And we saw back in chapter 9, that one of the chief angels, one of the chief generals that appears in his little army, his name is the Destroyer. Okay, it's like a gang. If you think about it, that's sort of like it is. The head is the enemy, he's the accuser, he's the liar, his top general is the destroyer. It's like this gang that is just out to destroy and wreak havoc everywhere. That's exactly what's going on, except at a much bigger level than any local gang could possibly do. Okay, on a celestial level. The dragon is really interesting because we've seen these 4 living creatures in chapter 4 and 5 that they look like animals. They look like what we would expect. There's the eagle, and there's the ox, and there's the one that has the man's face, and then there's the other one. I don't remember the other one. And they look like that. And we already saw back in Ezekiel where the cherubs, these special angels, seem to have at least characteristics that God has put into creation. Okay, it's like they are a higher level almost of what we see in creation. There is a passage in Ezekiel 28 that I believe, and a lot of scholars, not everybody believes this, but I believe that this passage in Ezekiel 28, verses 11 through 19, talk about the fall of Satan. Okay? And if that's true, then Satan is one of these special angels, one of these cherubs. And the description is one that he has like gems all over him, and he glitters and glows in multiple colors and all of that stuff. He walks on rocks and all this stuff. Sounds awfully dragonish, doesn't it? And I wonder, and this is my opinion, and you don't have to agree with me, and that's fine. We can talk about it second hour if you'd like. My opinion is, I think, I've really come to believe this, I think his natural form as one of these cherubs, just like a natural form of one cherub is like an ox and the natural form is like an eagle or whatever, I think the natural form of this particular angel is a dragon. I think he is dragonish. It makes sense to when we come to the Garden of Eden and his serpentine nature. Okay? Even if you think of like the Chinese zodiac, right? The Chinese, you have the year of the rat and the year of the rabbit, and you have the year of all these things. Have you ever wondered why 11 of the 12 are all animals that we see today, and the 12th one is mythical? The year of the dragon? Dragons don't exist. Dragons don't exist. Why are there 11 of them are animals that we see all over the place, and the 12th one they just made up? Is it possible that dragons did indeed exist in at least some form? Okay? Now, again, I'm telling you this is my opinion. Okay? I think I have some biblical support for it, but I'm certainly not going to be dogmatic about it. But I think that this is why we have the Satan, or the enemy that we have. He is dragonish in his nature. He is a destroyer in his nature. He is a liar in his nature. He is a snake with the forked tongue down to his very bones. That's who and what he is. And here in Revelation chapter 12, for the first time, we see him in all his dragonness glory. For who he truly is, as he's thrown to earth, and all bets are off now. He's here to do his worst. So, what do we see? What is heaven's response to Satan being kicked out? Another worship scene. Heaven, all of heaven in verses, next slide, all of heaven in verses 10 through 12. After he was thrown to the earth and his angels along with him, then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God, the ruling authority of his Christ has now come, because, watch this, the accuser of our brothers and sisters, the accuser, the Satan, the one who accuses them day and night before our God, it seems like he still has access to God, has been thrown down. But they, the people he's been accusing, overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives so much that they were afraid to die. We see people dying all throughout the Revelation. We see people dying throughout church history. Right? But especially in the Revelation, it's going to be ramped up in the second half, because that's when he's finally limited to earth. And so verse 12, therefore you heavens rejoice, because we see the end is coming. We see God has finally done something, made a move, and Satan lost that battle. He is now confined to earth. All heavens rejoice and all who reside in them, but woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you. And he is filled with terrible anger, because he knows that he has only a little time left. And even still, knowing that he has only a little time, he pushes forward his agenda, still trying to win in the last couple of seconds. And so what does he do? In these last few verses, as we get ready to wrap up, we see now, verse 13, when the dragon realized that he had been thrown down to the earth. Hey, I wasn't expecting this. It's written down, dude. It's written down. When he realized that it indeed did happen the way God wrote 2,000 years ago, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The Messiah was born, the Messiah is ascended, and now he is pursuing the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the two wings of a great eagle so that she could fly out into the wilderness. You can't take that literally. A woman is given wings like an eagle so she can fly? We're still working off of the sign, aren't we? We're still working off of the symbol. I'm not going to stand here and say, yes, a woman sprouted wings and flew away, because we're working off of a symbol. So if the symbol means Israel, which is what I think, then Israel was given the speed of an eagle so that she could fly out, run out into the wilderness to a place God prepared for her, where she's taken care of, away from the presence of the serpent. For how long? Time times half a time. For these 3.5 years. Next slide. God is going to protect Israel during the second half of the 70th week, and we're told into the wilderness where God is going to prepare for her. It's possibly there's a fortress in the country of Jordan that's called Petra. I've got a picture of it. You might recognize it from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This is where the Holy Grail is stashed. Because it can't come past the seal in the middle of the floor. So apparently they're going to find it in the future. Seriously, this is the same place that they put in the movie. But this is it's a beautiful place. I'd love to visit it someday. Maybe it'll probably be destroyed by the time we get back to Earth after the 70th week. But it is a mountain fortress in the wilderness, in the mountains of modern-day Jordan. Used to be called Edom in the Bible. It's biblical Edom. And a lot of people think that God is going to protect Israel when she flies to the mountains, when she flees to the wilderness, that she will be protected possibly here in Petra, because it's one of those places that by the time you get to the front door, if you're an enemy, you're already dead. Okay? It's so hard to get to the place that you die before you get there because you're under attack as they're defending the place. And if God is supernaturally protecting them, the enemies certainly aren't going to be able to get in there. Check this one out. Verse 15, the serpent spouted water like a river out of his mouth after the woman in an attempt to sweep her away by the flood. Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation, run to the mountains, run to the wilderness, pray that it's not on the Sabbath, because you're going to go only so far, and say, I can't go any far. You're going to die if you don't go any further. Okay. Pray that it's not in winter, because that's going to make it harder for you to get up into the fortress or get wherever you're going. Pray, if you are nursing or if you are pregnant, Jesus doesn't say it this way, but God help you. Because it's hard enough to get to this place if you're healthy and if you are not pregnant, if you're not carrying babies around. But if that's your case, if it's winter, if it's a Sabbath, if you're nursing or you're pregnant, God help you. Because you are going to be under attack. The devil, here we're told, is going to try to sweep them away. But God miraculously opens the earth to come to her rescue so that the ground swallowed the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And that makes him even more mad. It just completely ticks him off at the time to where, unable to destroy them, Satan will make war. We have verse 17. So the dragon became enraged at the woman and went away to make war on the rest of her children, those who keep God's commandments and hold to the testimony about Jesus. During this time, just add a couple of things here. Satan's kicked out of heaven. Israel runs into the wilderness, where she'll be supernaturally protected by God. And Satan makes war with the Jews who do not make it, the Jews who are still there, and I'm just going to say believers, because Christian is technically a church age term, and there's no church here, so I'm just going to say believers. There will be lots of people who come to faith in Jesus Christ during this time. And so starting at this midpoint and moving for the rest of these 3.5 years, we find Satan kicked out of heaven. We find Israel running into the wilderness, supernaturally protected. Satan is making war, and we'll find out how he does that in the next chapter. Satan is making war during this time. In the last chapter, chapter 11, we saw these two witnesses are preaching during this time. We see in chapters 8 and 9 that there are trumpet judgments that are happening during this time. All of this stuff is starting to stack up. Okay, it's one thing to just stick in our Bible and read straight through, but this is why I want to do it on a timeline, because this stuff is starting to stack up. It's starting to build on each other. And this is going to be a bad time and a bad place. What an inspirational sermon we've had today, right? This is why we want to make sure we don't focus so much just on how horrible things are going to be, but we do focus on the God who's going to fix it eventually. There's nothing on this board, there's nothing in this text that is catching God by surprise. It'll catch people by surprise, might even catch Satan and his crew by surprise, but it doesn't catch God by surprise. He will win when we get to the end. And in fact, what we see is him winning throughout this process, even though it looks like he's losing. Okay, so we worship him, we praise him. There's a great little worship scene right in the middle of this chapter. Yay, Satan is out of heaven. Woo! Heavens rejoice. Woe to the earth. That is the balance, that is the tension that we have to manage as we work through this. And so we pray for those who do not know Jesus as Savior, because this is what they're facing if they don't come to faith in Jesus before he comes. And we pray for us, and as we look forward to those who will believe during that time, for steadfastness, for perseverance, for good testimonies as we look forward to what is coming. And we pray for our attitudes, that we don't get cynical. Well, they're just getting what they deserve. These are still people who need to know Christ as Savior. Okay? And if God is willing to preach to them in so many different ways, even while judgment is going on, if God is willing to protect people, even people who do not yet believe in him, which I think Israel is not going to believe in him yet, and he's still offering them protection so they can believe, so that they can be saved. We need to keep in mind and have as much of God's perspective on this as possible as we go through this rather dark part of the book of the Revelation.